Okay, so thanks to everybody. I'm here with Eric Just for a new edition of our webinars, and I'm very happy for this being the third webinar of this new year 2023. Let me just briefly introduce Eric Just, which has a long career. He worked 28 years in IRAE and now works at CIRAD in France. CIRAD is the French Agricultural Research and International Cooperation Organization, where he is Deputy Director of the Agronomy and Food Processing Division. I know Eric mainly through the projects he coordinated during the past. Remix was a Horizon 2020 project now completed. Now we are connected through Intercrop Values, another European project. There is Biodiversify, which is a Prima project. So in general, Eric is now very busy coordinating a lot of researchers all over Europe. This webinar is going to focus on intercropping. Is a nice link to our previous webinar of last month, where we had Professor Michael Udvarti from University of Queensland. Last month, we talked about the symbiotic link between legumes and bacteria, nitrogen fixing bacteria. This month we're talking about intercropping, why it's important intercropping, when it's an important and interesting techniques, what are opportunities and challenges linked to legume. So without further ado, I will pass the command to Eric, and if you want to start sharing, and we start with the presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Perfectly.
Okay. So thank you very much for your invitation to give a talk. I must say that the title was the one indicated in the screen, but I will be a little bit broader, and my talk will be more a point of view than the review of some results and key, I must say, key or innovative results. So opportunities and challenges of grain cereal intercropping. So as you said, I'm Eric Just. So I'm working at CIRAD now from 2017. What I want to say is that my talk is a contribution to a scientific point of view and a position considering that intercropping is a relevant means to counterbalance the weaknesses of grain legumes. I mean, it's not the solution, it's one of the solutions. You know, because you are working on legumes, that these weaknesses came from the higher sensitivities in comparison to cereals, for example, to weeds, pests, and disease, and abiotic stresses, also because into biological into fixation. And for producing more legume, intercropping could be a solution. It probably allows to have a high level of the biological into fixation process, to ensuring minimum yield in low input systems and in organic farming, where it's very difficult to grow legumes, and providing economic return security to farmers when the legume is failing in the production. And then you have the associated crop in order to secure a minimum of return. The third point I want to say is to stabilize the production against to climate variability and climate change, and for supporting an agroecological transition of intensive legume cropping systems and strongly reduce the use of pesticides. So I want to share my point of view on that interest of using intercropping as a means to produce and to increase the production of legume. That could be a crazy hypothesis, perhaps at the beginning, but I feel that after having more than 20 years working with in agronomy with legumes, I feel that it could be interesting to think about that together. So as an introduction, I want to say that climate change and associated challenges are very important. You know very well all these challenges. I want to say that it's really a reality, and we know every day now, even with the problem of high temperature and frost in the same time, even with the abiotic stresses due to high temperature or to water stress, etc., we have strong challenges. So adaptation of agriculture is needed, and our challenge by using legume is how to get the best into fixation processes instead of using fertilizer and nitrogen, according to face this climate change impact. So a challenge is in link also with the dramatic biodiversity decline, and we need to strongly reduce the use of pesticides. So we hypothesize that species diversity is an insurance versus the risk of climate change and the market's price, and for management flexibility. And then legume has a role to play. And of course, we need to redesign and co-redesign with farmers and advisors and all the actors of the value chain. We need to redesign cropping system based on high diversity in order to go to an ecological intensification that is the basis for an agroecological transition. Just few definitions and scales of analysis. I will talk about cash crop, so marketable crop to provide food, feed, fiber, or bioenergy. I will talk about fallow period, the period between two cash crops. I will talk about cover crops, which are unharvested crop sown during this fallow period to provide non-marchand ecosystem services. I will talk about rotation, which is a diversification in time, very important. And I will talk about, of course, intercrop or intercropping, which is a technique of species mixture and a diversification in space. Intercropping, you know, it's a wide object. There are some definitions well known by our colleague coming from ecology and from the 70s in the last century, like Wille, for example. He said that this is the simultaneous growth of two or more species in the same field for a significant period, not necessarily sown and harvested together. So intercropping or species mixture or crop mixture could be understood in that definition. Of course, intercropping is an application of ecosystems based on ecological principles such as biodiversity, species interaction, integrated protection, as developed by our colleague, famous colleague Van der Merwe. And we have also a large, wide or traditional practices, and there is a diversity of systems in the different world regions, from annual cash crop systems, mixing, for example, here, cereal and legumes, multi-species pasture, of course, this is intercropping, typical intercropping, crop and trees together as agroforestry systems, trees and pasture and animals, tree and trees, etc. So as a large definition, this is intercropping. I will focus my talk on annual cash crop and species mixture of such cash crops. I want to give also a word on the how to evaluate the performances and the resilience or robustness of cropping system. You know that the cropping system was defined in particular by Michel Sibiot in France, but there are other definitions, but I like this definition very much. It is a cropping system which consists in an ordinarily cultivated species crop and coordinated agricultural practices or technical management on a field. Typically, the fact that we are in rotation with crop succession, the management of fallow period, etc., is a cropping system. So is a whole system that we need to mind about it We need to have an holistic analysis of such system. A cropping system is efficient if a regular production can be achieved at a targeted level according to the pedoclimatic condition, the market price, the value chain in which you are integrated, with few inputs and few negative externalities to provide a farmer income for farm with environmental sustainability. The resilience of an ecosystem, there are many definitions. I take one that I found it very interesting from our colleague Volker and collaborators in 2002. The resilience of an ecosystem, it's its ability to maintain the level of ecosystem services in the face of changing environment. And a resilience of an ecosystem, of a cropping system, could be its ability to maintain a high level of ecosystem services compromise expected during crossing hazards, I mean climate, pest, disease, etc. So this is a novel view for researchers, advisors, and farmers, and we need to adopt another criterion of performance more interesting than the famous gross margin. And we need to analyze at the cropping system level, and not only at the crop level. That is mostly the case for evaluating agronomic performance, and this is a great pity to me. Diversification in time and in space for what? For providing various ecosystem functions. Of course, genetic diversity, very important. Specific diversity, very important too. And diversification in space, I don't want to go in more details, but we need to analyze the diversification in space, in particular when we want to use the landscape in order to benefit and provide some biological regulation, in substitution to the use of chemical pesticides. And of course, diversification in time is also a rotation that is very important, and that, legume could be a very interesting previous crop that is very well known, but could be also some weak following crop in some cases for some pest and disease and on weed management. So we have to focus and to analyze all these aspects. Of course, diversification strategy by definition and as a good agronomic practice is a cropping system must be based on crop diversification at the farm level and at the plot scale level, of course. There are many aspects that we need to take into consideration as agronomists in the sensus lato, I want to say. We are agronomists here. To me, diversity of species to reduce the risk and bad harvest, for example, diversity of varieties and cultivars to limit the risk of pest and disease, diversity of composition of crop covers within the plot, species mixture of like intercropping, but also variety or cultivar mixture. I saw that now there are in some countries some very important crops such as wheat that are grown on species mixed cultivar mixture, and that was not the case few or 1 decade ago. So we need to use that aspect and to diversify crop over time. The role of rotation is very well known, like the role of landscape level. I will not come back to all these strategies, but we need to think about all these strategies, including intercropping, but intercropping is not the solution, is one of the solutions of these strategies. What are the different benefits of crop rotation succession? You know that very much, so I don't want to go into details. I just want to say that we need to exploit the wide variety of plant traits and characteristics for providing various ecosystem functions and ecosystem services at the end. And we need to use this diversification, and in particular the use of legumes, more adaptable, flexible to climate change impact than monoculture or very simple rotation. There are a lot of solutions in using various species and cultivars and alternate annual and perennial covers, such as temporary grassland or ley. I will not go into this aspect, but it's very important also for legume. And this is a part of the cropping system also to me. I want to mention it to say that as an agronomist, we need to think about a wide picture of what is possible. I want to go just to give a focus on what I'm calling multi-service mixed cover crop. This is very important because legumes could be important part of these multi-service cover crops. This is a cover crop sown during fallow period or in the zone, in the catch crop, to provide simultaneously various ecosystem services, such as catch crop for nitrate or sulfate recycling and avoiding pollution of water, green manure for nutrient recycling, limitation of erosion and improving the soil fertility, the different aspects of the soil fertility, allow carbon sequestration because you are doing more photosynthesis during the year, and then after you are incorporating such organic carbon in the soil. You can do some biocontrol to suppress or control pests and disease. And of course, you could have others ecosystem services such as giving bee food or wildfire refuge, and of course landscape aesthetic. That is quite important in some region for the tourism and for developing activities in the rural area. We need to avoid these services when we want to use such cover crops. And then we need to focus on non-host crop for pathogens of cash crops. And then when we want to use legumes in the multi-service cover crops, we need to think strongly about that. The mixture of species is clearly a security to succeed in cover cropping. When you're sowing in, for example, in August in France or in some other countries, it's very important to maximize the success of cover crop establishment. So mixing some species, if one is not very well adapted to very strong water stress or to could not germinate when the water stress is too strong, other can germinate, for example. And for achieving a high level of compromise between services targeted. So species mixture must be reasoned for traits complementarity, and we have a large diversity of species that could be used. And of course, leguminous is a pillar to me of such multi-services cover crop because they are able to grow without any nitrogen fertilization, which is most of the time limiting in fallow period because you are not using fertilizer, of course, in such a fallow period, not to avoid increasing the nitrate pollution, for example. And then we have a large diversity of species and cultivar in our genetic resources that we don't use sufficiently to meet this diversity in order to provide such ecosystem services and to have the good partner in the intercrop or of cover crops. So that is a very key point in order to search in our bank genes or germ plants bank how we can find the best species and cultivar adapted to such cover cropping. Of course, the multi-services cover crop of legumes and here crucifera could be as efficient as only crucifera, for example, in mitigating nitrate leaching. It is not very well known. So people think that including legumes in cover crops is not a good solution. It is because as you can see here, in comparison to the bare soil, this is the mineral nitrogen at the destruction of the cover crop in the early spring, after having an autumn and winter cover cropping. You can see that with the mixture of crucifer and legumes and crucifer that you can see here, the second bar, we have the same level of mineral nitrogen remaining in the soil done with the species very well known, very efficient to catch nitrate in the soil. So it's very important. Why? Because you are increasing also in the cover crop the level of nitrate concentration, and then you are increasing the green legume effect for the succeeding crop. That is very interesting also for recycling nitrogen and for using the N2 fixation at the benefit of the succeeding crop, instead of using N fertilizer or reducing the use of N fertilizer. Of course, we have done many experiments at the cropping system level to show that when you are increasing the grain legume in the cropping system, unfortunately, in our conditions, for example, here in southern France, we are also increasing nitrate leaching. So to avoid that, a solution is very efficient, is to use cover cropping after or before or both grain legume cash crop, in order to avoid the transfer of mineral nitrate to groundwater, because legumes are not not sufficiently efficient to capture, to uptake all the mineral nitrogen in the soil in comparison to cereal. So having a cover crop before or after the legume is a very good and very efficient way to avoid this problem of nitrate leaching, and then we are counterbalancing these weaknesses, and we are recycling nitrogen plus most of the nutrient also that we do not focus so much, but it's very important also for the cropping system in a world where fertilizer use will be decreased. Of course, multi-services cover crop, including legumes, are very efficient to provide a climate change mitigation by providing carbon storage in the soil, because you are increasing, thanks to the legume, the production of the biomass in the cover crop, and you are increasing also the amount of nitrogen. And then by these different aspects, you are also increasing the carbon sequestration, even if you could have a little increase of greenhouse gases emission of N2O after incorporation of the residues, because they are more rich in nitrogen. But this increase of N2O reduction is very small in comparison to the capture of CO2 and the increase of organic carbon in the soil. So that's very important, that legumes are very key for such services. I want to say also that we did a work of reviewing what is done in the bibliography for cruciferal legume cover cropping. And we have wrote with our colleague in John Kierkegaard, which is very well known in the biofumigation ILSw-s1e topic, a synthesis in Advances in Agronomy a few years ago on the fact that cruciferal legume cover cropping could be a way for biocontrol. And it's not well known, and we are a lack of research done on that in order to avoid using some pesticides. And then we, as you see, we think it's an avenue towards new multi-services paradigm. And I want to say that it's important to see the legume as a very nice partner to crucifera, and we can also identify some legumes that are not, I must say, reduced by the effect of crucifera on the growth of legume, because they are producing glycosinolates that are extruded in the soil. They are going in the soil by the roots, and then some legumes and some other crops are very sensitive and are very impacted, negatively impacted. But some legumes can be compatible, and then we could have a very nice cover, very efficient after to have services of biocontrol. So we have to do a lot of work, research on that to give an added value to all the species and varieties of legume that could be used in such aspect. Now I will come back to intercropping, I must say, as cash crops. Of course, intercropping of annual crops is quite well known. You know, there is a wide diversity of system. I just want to say that for me, I have an experience, and it's a small experience in comparison to all what is published in bibliography, and I don't want to do a review, but just give you a point of view. You understood my talk. So here it's a legume, cereal and legume, and you have various type of spatial patterns. You can have mixture on the row, you can have alternate row, you can have strip, I must say, small, narrow strip intercrops, and then there is a wide variety of different intercrops that are possible to be grown. And according to the different plant characteristic and species characteristic, the spatial design that is optimized is not necessarily the same, because the competition and the facilitation processes that could be that will occur are not the same according to the spatial design and the species. You understand that, for example, if you imagine here you have soybean here and sunflower, the difference in height is very important. And then you have more competition for light. But you can find some spatial design that are limiting the competition for light, but that are sufficiently optimized to have the interaction, the positive interaction, to increase the N2 fixation, thanks to the fact that sunflower is capturing or taking more rapidly than soybean the mineral nitrogen, and then the soybean is forced to increase its own N2 fixation. Oh, so intercropping to improve productivity and stability by species complementarity is very key. These two aspects. I want to say that we need to improve, to increase the production. Surely, even in the northern countries, because we need to probably reduce the land area where we are growing some crops, and perhaps we need to have more trees in the landscape. And in the southern countries, we need to increase the production per unit of area. It's absolutely crucial to avoid deforestation. So we need to continue increase the productivity. This is a very key message. But we need to avoid using chemical inputs that leads to all these negative externalities that you know very well. So intercropping is an efficient way to improve yield and yield quality, in particular in limited abiotic resources. I mean, in low input farming system and in organic farming. We have demonstrated that very widely. But intercropping is not the solution in very intensive systems, because fertilizer and the fact that we have selected breed species and variety adapted to intensive system, then the systems are quite efficient, even if there are some losses of nitrogen into emission, nitrate leaching. We can reduce these losses by an optimization, but increasing the efficiency. But even with that, when we want to use intercropping in such intensive system, intercropping is less efficient than monocropping. So this is not magic. That's very important to understand. Intercropping advantage then mostly occur in such limited condition, and it's very widely demonstrated. I want to say that direct and transfer between species are very limited for annual crops. I don't want to talk about perennial crops, grassland, where there are more interaction between roots for different years. But we have not demonstrated that we are higher than the range of measurement error or analysis error. It's very few, because you are influx and efflux that are compensated. And indirect transfer by mineralization of larvae, carbon, and nitrogen pool is also limiting because the duration of the crop is limited. Then we need to understand that niche complementarity for nitrogen in intercropping in arable intercropping is mostly due by niche complementarity by the fact that, for example, cereal is more competitive to mineral nitrogen on the soil, and then the legume need to increase its rate of into fixation. And then you have a complementarity of nitrogen. Because when you are in legume monocropping, legume is uptaking a great part of nitrogen by uptaking mineral nitrogen on the soil. So putting a cereal inside the legume cover force the legume to increase the rate of N2 fixation. And this is the main aspect you need to have in mind. And this is the main aspect that we can give an added value for implementing our intercrops. So the best mixture depends on various levels. As I ever said, species, cultivar, the level of fertilization, biotic stress, irrigation, what you want. And modeling intercropping system, I will not go into too much detail of modeling. I could spoke about modeling, as you know, but I did not focus on that on my topic today. But modeling intercropping is a challenge, but we are working hard on that because it could be useful to optimize, in particular to pre-screen the efficient combination of two species with some plant trait characteristics. And then it's not them, it's them to determine species and varietal characteristics suited to mixture. And we need to make some progress in modeling intercropping in order to help us to go faster in such work, because there are so many possible combinations that it could be crazy to work without using modeling in order to pre-screen this potential efficient combination. I just want to give another history on the fact that we need to learn in intercropping on different aspects. I will take the example of lentil production in organic farming, where we have done some work when I was at INRAE in Toulouse, in southwest France, with the work of PhD thesis of our colleague. And sorry, excuse me. Oh. Okay. So the key question was, is it possible to produce lentil production in organic farming in some area where you have so many pests and disease, and then you cannot use pesticides? So despite the economic and agronomic advantages of intercrop, and in particular of lentil, there is a strong demand, and farmers want to produce lentil because they are a high selling price, there are no need for fertilization, and it's also a diversification in the rotation. But the farmers have low and very unstable productivity, which are three major yield reducing factors: weeds, reshoots, and lodging. And then we want to know if canning intercrop be a solution to reduce these three main factors that have a very negative impact on the productivity of lentil. And then we have demonstrated that, first of all, as for other grain legume crop, intercrop with spring wheat and spring lentil in our situation could be very efficient in the production of total grain yield. The total grain yield, as you can see here, was higher in this experiment than the lentil soil crop. And another key point is that lentil intercrop actual grain yield was lower to lentil soil crop when there is not so much limiting factors. That was the case in our situation of the 2 experimental year. The key point is because there is a strong competition of wheat over the lentil. The lentil is not so strong in comparison even with the winter, the spring pea. So the key point is that you have an increased production, but less lentil. Is there an interest of growing lentil in this condition and on an economic point of view? So we have analyzed the gross margin here expressed in euro per hectare, and the total gross margin was inferior, even with higher yield of intercrop, than lentil soil crop margin in our condition. So intercrop were less profitable than lentil soil crop because lentil determine the intercrop gross margin with a price 4 times higher than the wheat price. The key point is that this is an evaluation done like we are doing all the time in agronomy by doing harvest by hand. You know, we are sampling in the field condition. But what is the situation when we are in farming condition and we are mechanical harvesting? And that's the key aspect. Because we know that in farming condition, there are a lot of lodges of lentil grains when they are harvesting. So we did also in the experiment an analysis in order to see from the potential yield, that is very well known yield gap concept. You know that we have some factors that determine the reduction of potential yield in attainable yield, and you have other reduction factors such as disease, pest, weed, or pollutant that are reducing this attainable yield on abiotic resources in actual yield. But our key point was to evaluate first, and this is something we have added in the yield gap concept with Loïc Viguier, the PhD, is doctor now. So we have proposed to thought about harvested yield, and more than that, marketable yield. Harvested yield, because we know and we saw that there are a lot, we could have grain yield, grain losses in the field condition with mechanical harvest, even with good settings. That when farmers are well mastering the settings of his harvester combiner. And we also see that for giving an added value to lentil, you need to go further and to analyze what is the marketable yield. Because after having harvested, you have the quality of the grain, because you have broken grains, small grains, brushy damages, residue, and you cannot sell that to human for food. And then you have losses that could be very important from the attainable yield to marketable yield. You could have a strong decrease. And then we analyze that in our experiment using here a prototype of mechanical combiner that we have in our experimental station here. And we saw that for lentil, the percentage of harvest, of grain harvest, was only half, even with good settings, even with good combiner, efficient combiner. So this means that half of the grain is on the ground. So we have lost this potential of grains. And we saw that when we grow lentil plus a very small part of wheat, we have decreased strongly the amount of losses. And when we are comparing what is harvested from the monocrop of lentil to the intercrop, even if the potential yield on the plant was lower, we have a higher yield, not significantly different, but the same yield harvested. So that is very important to consider harvest losses when we want to sort to human consumption. For example, such lentil, we have to understand that there are also some losses. I will give you an idea of that at the end. I want just to show you why we are increasing the percentage of harvested grains in intercrop, because we have a stake effect thanks to the wheat. Even if the wheat is only at less than 20% of the plant density normally used in monocropping of wheat. And this is very important to understand that we need to adapt the density. We need to optimize and to search for the best plant species and the best variety associated to the lentil. So it was an experiment very interesting for us. We learned a lot. You see that for the soy crop planting at harvest, you understand why we have more losses, because the lodging was very important, and it's most of the time, all the time the case, except when you are in organic farming and you have a lot of weeds, because the weeds can also do the role of stake. And at the end, what is the end of the story? The end of the story, because of all these processes, at the end, when you are avoiding the grain that have brushage impact, that are broken, and that is the marketable grain, you have a higher economic return with the intercrop. Why? Because, and the total margin, including the cost of sorting and cleaning grains, including that cost, with very efficient machinery that is very costly, because the volume rate efficiency is very low, because you are using plates, densitometry plates, etc. That takes a lot of time. Even with that, and the cost, if I well remember, of 80 euro per ton clean, we have an increased gross margin for two reasons. First, we are harvesting more finally marketable lentil, and secondly, because we harvested a little bit wheat that has no price in the organic farming market, because you never found wheat with a protein content of 16%. That was the result we have in such experiment. So you understand that intercropping is really a way here to produce more, better, and more economically efficient lentil in such type of system. I want to go very rapidly to another aspect that you know, and I want to recall you, is the fact that high diversified based cropping system is really a pillar of agroecology, and of course, legumes is very important. So I don't want to go into details, but we did experiment in order to do innovative prototyping of cropping system, including legumes and including intercrop with cereal and legume, or sunflower and soybean, for example. So we did an approach, and we made some, we compare some rotations. For example, a rotation that is very classical in the southwest of France, in non-irrigated systems, sorghum, sunflower, durum wheat, and we included faba bean before durum wheat, and we included two legumes such as we have included also sunflower between no, I make a mistake. We included two legumes that were soybean and pea in the third rotation. So we want to have an objective of decrease strongly the use of pesticide. We are in very low input farming, and we want to see if intercropping could be a solution in rotation. So in that system, we have used, of course, cover crops in order to recycle nutrient, in order to avoid losing nitrogen, etc. I don't want to go into details. And we have used soybean, sunflower intercrops in a very imaginative, innovative rotation that is not crop anymore by no people than us at the time. It was a rotation of intercrops: soybean, sunflower, durum wheat, winter pea, and triticale faba bean. And we did that with very large scale experiment, not in very small plot, because we want to use mechanical materials used by farmers to be as realistic as possible. And what were the results? The result is that we could use less pesticide with such innovative systems, and we could decrease strongly the use of pesticide by 20 to 60%, for example. We use half less fertilizer using legume crops, as you know, but we had more labor needed, in particular with cover crops in the rotation where we included cover crops, as is very well known. So in that aspect, we have all the indicators we want to improve were improved, except the labor time. On an economic performances, the diversified cropping systems, unfortunately, were less profitable, minus 20%, in particular when we include cover crops, due to less of gross proceeds, lower prices, and more mechanical costs, despite less operational costs. So it is a lesson for us, because we want to promote grain legume innovative system, but at the end, using the economic condition, the agricultural policies, the subsidies, these systems are not economically good, because they were reinforced by 5 decades of increasing the efficiency of such system, because the subsidies are oriented to such systems, and because we have a lack of practical knowledge also, and a lack of implementation in optimization. And it was a nice lesson for us that researchers have also to learn to practice innovative systems. And then we have a lot to do in research to improve the economic efficiency in such system, including legume as a cash crop in soil crop, or including, of course, intercrops. So this means that if we want to use intercrops, we need to base our thinking on high value, high price intercrops, such as lentil, such as lupin, such as beans, for specific markets. And then for such niche market, we can strongly increase the economic value, but not with pea, not with faba bean. Unfortunately, I must say, because the price of such grain legume is too low, because of the system and the situation we are at the moment in an economic and global situation. We had different points of discussion in the paper. I don't want to go into details, but of course we saw that the choice of the crop species, as I said, is crucial. When we see that the cropping system is less productive due to lower genetic potential and actual yield, and a decrease in chemical input use that are very efficient, we need to recognize that. Choosing species that are characterized by a high price is essential. Lentil, chickpea, etc. For human consumption, we need to focus on human consumption. In particular, if we want to substitute a part of animal protein by vegetal plant protein, that has sense. Intercrop grain products were sold in a mixture without any added value. It was a crazy thing, finally. So the evaluation and the stability of resilience to climate change need to be done also by simulation, but because we saw even in 6 years of experiment that it was too short to say something significant. So we need to progress also in modeling in order to do simulation on a broader, on longer time to evaluate the stability, because we did not find that it was so, I would say, demonstrated in our experiment that the stability was better, even if we are largely saying that in our community. Just a few points to say that after the REMIX European project that was introduced by Nelson at the beginning of the talk, we have a new Horizon Europe project on intercropping. And of course, you imagine that we are growing intercropping with legumes in such a type of. So REMIX is finished, but you can look at all the results we had in the website that is still alive, and we have a lot of policy brief, technical fact sheet, very interesting. We have many different situations that we found in European situation, very innovative farmers. It's amazing to see in practice what farmers are doing, in particular in organic farming, I must say. And then we are very lucky to be granted for a new project, because it's very competitive, and we were not sure to have another project after REMIX. But we are happy that intercrop value that was granted, and that now is a 4-year project until October 2026, with a budget that is quite significant. And we have 25 partners and from 15 countries, including associated countries, because some of our friends in Europe leave us, like UK or Switzerland did not integrate the research association in Europe. And we have also some countries by the way of CIRAD in Africa that was included in the project. We have an internet website, so you can go further to learn about the project that is still that is just starting, I must say. I will not give you any details about that, just to say that we want to develop a new concept to increase the adoption and to increase the success in adoption of intercropping in Europe. We think that we need to work on 4 pillars of the pyramid here. To analyze the social demand, and in particular, we want to focus on human consumption of legumes in order to give an added value of such crops. We need to focus on multi-services of intercropping. We need to analyze strongly the lock-ins for the adoption in the value chain. And we need to analyze the niches in the new market that are very important in an economic point of view, in order to start the adoption and to increase the landscape with intercropping, and then that could be an example for others, for other farmers, other type of systems and the way to do agriculture to adopt intercropping. So we need to do an agroecological transition of food system. I mean, we need to focus not only on production. We need to focus on market. What is the market needs, in particular for human consumption? That is the way we have focused on that project, in order to increase and give an added value to farmers that are growing grain legumes. So we want to develop an interdisciplinary and multi-actor approach, a true one, I must say, by capitalizing on a new science that we could say it's an agroecology science, because we need all these skills and others to be efficient, probably. The concept of intercrop value is to do operational research with and for stakeholders at the value chain level. That's very important. And we want to see if we can inverse the famous and so-called paradigm from the farm to fork better than from the fork to farm. I want to say that from the diet we need to develop, and then we need to develop the production of grain legume for human consumption, and then develop the value chain back and the production to feed this market and to help developing a new food system. Perhaps it's completely crazy idea, but we believe that it's very stimulating for us. I don't want to say much than we need to analyze the socio-technical system, because from the 5, 6, or 7 decades and the European agricultural policy, the system is locked. The system use all the subsidies and the way to develop the value chain to self-reinforcement. And then we need to understand where are the lock-ins and where are the niches that we can develop in order to increase the intercropping and by the way, the green legume production. Of course, this is based on the theory given by Giff and colleagues, and to us, even we have niches of innovation, we can go in the mainstream, and we expect that the new generation, like our young colleagues, could join the mainstream, and the mainstream could become a part intercropping systems than not only mono soy crop systems. So this is a relevant approach for us for agroecological transition studies. Of course, we need to have an assessment of services and disservices, because we need to do compromise. Life is compromised. Ecosystem services is compromised too. Of course, we have an organization of projects. I don't want to go into details, but we have a very important work package dedicated to co-innovation case studies with all the actors of the value chain on regional and local case studies as example of how we can develop innovation niches. We have some work package dedicated to an understanding of intercrop performances by developing modeling approaches that we absolutely need to go more rapidly to pre-screening, for example. We want to develop also the meta-experimentation to evaluate the ecosystem services delivery in true, because when we are doing and we see the result of meta-analysis, we are always frustrated. And we want to manage also intercropping system to see if they could be available to decrease greenhouse gases emission, improve soil health, and also we want to do, because it's absolutely needed, machinery studies in order to improve the efficiency of harvesting and to avoid losing such grain produce on the plant, but you are not collecting at the farm at the end. And we have a work package dedicated to innovation in the food chain, and of course to the study of lock-ins and opportunities of new markets. That is very important to see if we can develop a success in a decade of increasing intercropping in Europe. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but we are at the moment designing a meta-synthesis. We want to do a meta-synthesis of a network of experiment based on common protocol with very rigorous statistical method to be analyzed at the end to test hypotheses without any bias in the analysis, because when you are looking at meta-analysis coming from papers and published papers, you see that it's very difficult to answer to very specific questions. We have 15 case studies. I don't want to go into details. You see in the black points here where they are located, even in Africa and in Indian Ocean, Iceland. We have one in that case. The type of intercrop analyzed, I don't want to go into too much details. Of course, we are only in intercropping, not in agroforestry system. And we are working on legume species considered, because it is crucial to use locally adapted species. Then, even in our common protocol of meta-analysis of result, we are using locally species and cultivar adapted. It's very important that we want to use the species adapted to the local situation and for the local production. And then we have a wide variety of legume analyzed in intercropping with cereal, such as winter or spring wheat, faba bean, lupin, soybean, cowpea, groundnuts. And of course, we are also some cases where we use legume as service crop or companion crop to provide ecosystem services not harvested, neither in grain nor in biomass or forage, but to produce, for example, a soil cover in order to avoid using chemical with pesticide. As an example, you can see sunflower soybean in strip intercropping, triticale fava bean in row intercropping, durum wheat intercropping in mixture on the row. So all these spatial design need to be adapted, as I said, to the species. And we have also example of intercrop in tropical cropping system. For example, we are working a lot in La Réunion Island in order to avoid using any herbicides in sugarcane because there are too much pollution of groundwater with such molecules. And we want to use legume companion species in sugarcane. We want to intercrop maize and soybean in Africa and to use also in other part of Africa, the intercrop of millet and cowpea in order to secure the production in the Sahelian region because there are some climatic variability and then it's a way to secure the production. We want to develop a modeling approach. I don't want to go into details. You will have the slides. And we have a partnership in Europe and in other countries. And then I don't want to go into all the details of that. Just few conclusion and prospect to finish my talk that is longer than I have planned initially. Sorry, I apologize for that. So for me, agroecology or the diversification paradigm. The crop system prototype demonstrate that diversification allows reducing the reliance of the use of inputs such as fertilizer and pesticide while satisfying correct profitability in some conditions, but not in all conditions, as I indicated. Legume is a pillar of diversification of arable cropping system. Cover crop is also a key to redesign highly diversified cropping system, of course, including legumes in such multi-services cover crop. There is a great importance of quantitative assessment. The devil is in the details. Think about the story of lentil. Think about the fact that we are analyzing the gross margin at the crop level and not at the cropping system. So we need to rethink completely the way to evaluate profitability. We need to optimize the rotation, the position of the legume in the rotation. Sometimes we are doing rotation by habit, but they are not the most relevant, even grown by farmers. And researchers need to find the best management practices in order to provide the best compromise for services, thanks to legume. So for using the potential of legume, we need to rethink the optimization of practices. And then the challenge is to redesign profitable arable cropping system with legume. We need to do research. There are a number of factors still to be optimized, as I said. The key point is how to return an added value to farmers also. It's very important because growing intercropping is not the problem, technical problem. And the problem is an economic, the economic issue. We need to think about the paradigm of agroecology since at the territorial scale and at the world agro-food chain, because there are so many lockings and we cannot unlock the system as it is at the moment. And then we need to take into consideration that aspect. And modeling is really a relevant tool for exploring solutions for local pedoclimatic conditions. But this means that we need to improve our model for doing relevantly simulation using intercropping. So we have finally a very large research agenda to optimize intercropping system, including legumes, because legume can be cash crop, companion crop, multi-service cover crops. To me, the challenge are the following. Perhaps there are others, but this is what I thought when I prepared the talk. The selection and breeding of the two partners of cover crop is key. legume, if we want to produce legume by the way of cover crops, of intercrop, legumes must be the most productive in the cover crop, in the intercrop, sorry. So we want to produce the larger grain product proportion of legume in the intercrop, not half-half with the cereal, for example. So we need to screen to show the adapted cultivar. And the associated crop need to be a good companion crop, a good partner, allowing the provision of ecosystem function with low competition for legume. And then we need to maximize the legume production. So we need to co-breed the two species. And of course, Paolo and his colleague Luciano Pesetti will be agree with that, I'm sure. We need to optimize the technical management is very crucial because we need to adapt the spatial design to use the best as possible the abiotic resources, light, water, nutrients, and suppress pathogen, plus favor biological regulation. So we have a lot of work to do. We need to optimize technical management, plant density, technical art. It is not only by sowing half of the density. This is not the good story, as I demonstrated for lentil, for example. Until 17% of wheat was the best solution to grow lentil and to increase the final outcome of the intercropping system. And we need to work on post-harvest technical chain. It's very key to maximize the added value of grain legume, the technique of sorting, cleaning of grain to be optimized for providing the highest price and the best cost efficiency. So we have a lot of work to do. And surely we have first to change, to have a posture and paradigm commitment is really necessary when we want to work with intercropping coming from soil cropping. We need to think differently. So sorry for being too long, and I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Eric. It was a very nice presentation, and I'm sure that nobody in our audience is complaining about the length, since everybody is still here, since almost nobody left from the beginning. So it's now time for questions. If somebody has a question, you can raise your hand, or if nobody's talking, just unmute yourself and talk. Okay, I see a question from Paolo. Paolo, you're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric. I think your perspective from farm to fork, well, it makes a lot of sense to me. It is like consuming not what the market wants, but what agricultural sustainability wants. A specific question. When we have legumes in intercrops, very often legumes are at competitive disadvantage. It might be beans or soybean with corn, or pea with cereals, or clovers with grasses, etc., etc. Now, we could escape the problem by, for example, limiting the competition through strip sowing, or by decreasing the sowing density of the more competitive partner, or even by a kind of breeding that would be like decreasing the competitiveness of the stronger partner, no? Or also we could, on the contrary, focus on the competitive ability of the feeble partner, that is the legume. So, of course, we might have some tactic decisions, not in the short term, but in the long term, which do you think is the best strategy to cope with that?
Unfortunately, the answer could not go to think that to me, breeding is at the medium term. I don't know at long term. In the medium term, we have so much to screen in the genetic resources, how to find the species, the cultivar less competitive, and legume species and cultivar more competitive than for example the cereal. So to me, at the long term, I don't know. But at the short and the medium term, I must say that most of the progress will be in the agronomy sphere. In the first, I must say, plant characteristic, plant trait screening. This is not breeding. Screening in all the resources we have. And secondly, to adapt the technical management. You talk about decreasing the density, the spatial design. It's not so easy to do that, and we need to. Why modeling is important? Because when you are looking to strip intercropping, for example, you need to think about how to use the positive interaction you need to have between the two species to have a positive impact at the end, final impact. And if you have wide strips, you do not have such interaction between the two species, and you are losing the potential of niche complementarity for nitrogen. So we have a lot of to do in agronomic sphere in interaction with, I must say, geneticians or breeders that are interesting to do not only breeding or but are interesting to do phenotyping with agronomists in order to optimize the system by the different way we need to aggregate in order to increase as much as possible the complementarities and decrease the competition. But we need to clearly define what is the objective of the work to start. And this is something we do not do sufficiently. We want to work on intercropping, but we did not define what is the objective we want to target. If the objective is to target the maximum production of lentil in intercropping, this is not the same thing that having an equilibrium of cereal and legume because you want to feed an animal. So it's very important in order to avoid losing time to define the objective of the work we have to work to do together with all the researcher working in agronomy census later together. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I believe that breeding in that case could be useful, but at short and medium term, it's a dream. And we have so much, how do you say, lever, des leviers en français, lever. We have so much lever that we did not use sufficiently. We have a lot of lever that we can use in interaction to increase the productivity of the system. Because we do a lot of work on efficiency on soil cropping. So we have a lot of aspects to learn, even as researcher, in the way to mimic the nature and to have nature-based solution, very productive, also for our cropping system.
Breeding is not short term anyway, by definition. No, it takes years.
Okay, there's another raised hand. Tom Workington.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for a very good talk and for convincing us that intercropping is a good strategy. I like the big project that you described, the new one that you're starting, and I was interested to note that you mentioned citizens as one of your 4 areas of input. And so my question is, do you also, as part of your research team, do you have some social scientists in there, sociologists or economists? I think that would probably be quite important.
Yeah, the very rapid answer, yes and yes.
Okay, thank you.
And why citizen? Because in some co-innovation case study, which are local innovation situation. For example, we have a case studies focus on collective restoration in English, la restauration collective. Who could help me in English?
Restoration.
Restoration food chain.
For example, for whole people in some house dedicated or in schools, they want to increase a lot organic products, and they want to increase a lot local products with more vegetal protein. In that case, citizens with policymakers, with farmers, with the people actor the agri-food chain are working together to develop a local food chain because the market is there, but we are not feeding the market. And this is typically from the fork to farm paradigm, because the fork said, now we need to change the diet to have an environmental impact also. And then we want that you are growing legumes, chickpea, beans, lentil, etc. There is no local production. It's crazy. We have the market. We can guarantee prices, and no one is growing is growing grain legume for human consumption. It's a crazy thing. And then it's a local market, but could be very efficient economically. And then we have citizens very pushy to develop that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I don't see other raised hands. Just oh no, wait, Udo Prince.
I just want to take the floor to say hello to Akko, to Etienne Pilorget, to some I see there, and nice to see you again and others, because we have shared some time in the work. So for those who are, I understand. I know. Yeah. Hello. Sorry, Udo.
Oh, no problem. I wanted to react on the last. I'm very glad to see you to stress that that intercropping is not a solution for everything. Which was I've been to several conferences where people were so annoyed with farmers because they didn't see all the advantages that are clearly there, and they are stupid and backward, and but they don't realize the economic reality. So thank you for stressing that. And but I was especially your last remark on that we have quite a big opportunity to tap into this protein transition, which is taking place, and the increase in demand for plant proteins in the market. We have been working in the Netherlands for I think 15 years now in trying to tap into that growing market. One of the big frustrations there is that the food producers always tend to go for the last cent when they are able to get the same product for 1 cent cheaper, but then from all the way around other corner of the world, then they choose the cheaper one. They don't use so that's a frustration that we are into time and time again. We've done market chain projects with lupins and meat replacers. We've done projects with faba beans, also targeting meat substitutes. And time and time again, the first and the second year, the food producers are very enthusiastic because they can put a very nice picture of a local farmer on their products. And once the picture is taken, then they go back to the cheaper products coming from all the way, either from Australia or from wherever, where it's produced a little bit cheaper than we can do it. So it is. I think there is an opportunity, but the global market is still, to say it bluntly, a bitch. So it's very difficult to grasp the moment and to really to make a change on a local level. That's more.
We are perfectly agree on the fact, and probably you told us that you have the same experience than me. From 2 decades, I see that there is no way to increase intercropping by concurrencing the normal market. This is why we think that we need to rethink from the fork to farm. We need to see the niches of innovation, and we need to see how to go in the mainstream, but not replacing the mainstream. We are not able to compete with the soybean coming from South America. This has no sense. Or for I must say, the mainstream value chain, they want very cheap prices. So you will never convince farmers that are doing, I must say, intensive agriculture from the 6 last decades with the subsidies they have to do intercropping. No. So, but we have an opportunity to demonstrate that in some situation, intercropping is a relevant solution and also an economic solution interested for farmers to have an added value. Perhaps they need to think differently. Also, farmers not to go all the time in this famous integrated value chain agriculture that we have in Europe. We need to have an agroecological transition. It will take time, but ours we can do a little in order to help this transition arriving as rapidly as possible, because we have the fire in the house. Climate change, biodiversity, erosion, pollution of water, crazy with pesticides. Of course, in some country of Europe, not all over the world, but if Brazilian measure their groundwaters, they don't measure any groundwater concentration in pesticide. It's easy to not to see that. If you are measuring that, I believe that perhaps it could give sense to citizens also that we need to shift strongly the system. We can do a little bit and try to put some an aiguillon in France, to put
a needle
in the system to say perhaps we can do differently, and we can do economically efficient for some niches, and we can start with that and see how the mainstream can adopt or not such work. But it's a nice challenge we have in the future, in the near future, I must say, because the fire is in the house.
This is a very broad topic. It's generally referred, there is the concept of food sovereignty, that is about not moving away from the food production from simply value production chain towards something that has the intrinsic social value, and so not everything is only driven by the market, by the price. Otherwise, each actor will go for the cheapest solution all over the chain, and obviously the results are not easy to decide, and are not easy to tame and to move toward what is desirable. I wanted to ask Eric a question, which I guess is going to be the last one. Since an intercropping system is more complex than a single one, just selection of varieties and a selection of species, do you foresee that we at some point there will be some golden standards, some typical situations for I don't know, if you want to have a cereal and a legume or other types, other typical pairings, or somehow the situation, because obviously there will never be a single golden standard for intercropping. Is too wide. But even considering the different weathers and the different climates, just looking at Europe, do you think that there will be room for having some standard practices? Because those are very good at attracting people, because they can be they can be taught and diffused. Otherwise, if each case is different and each case is a research case, obviously that makes harder for farmers to adopt these techniques.
Now, as you understood, there is not a standard practice. This is not a practice that you can advise easily. You understood that it's a very intensive knowledge demanding intercropping. You need to learn every day when you are practicing intercropping, and farmers who are practicing intercropping, they are experimentators all the time.
Okay.
So we need also, this is why I say we need to change our posture and paradigm, because we need to do research differently. We need to provide the knowledge to farmers and method to farmers and advisors that they can adopt and adapt in their local condition to grow themselves the intercrop according to their objective. So
Okay.
it's a completely new story of agronomy transfer, of knowledge. We are in a new area, the area of intensive knowledge needed in science, but also in practice. And then it could be a problem for also advisors that don't have the knowledge to help farmers improving the system. So
okay.
We are in the transition period also for that, because agroecology need is very intensive in knowledge, scientific knowledge, practical knowledge, and we need to hybridize this knowledge. So researchers need to be in the different position than before. We just need to help actors and farmers and advisors to develop and optimize themselves, their system.
Okay. So if there are no other rising hands, I thank again Eric Just for today. It was very interesting webinar, very interesting presentation. To everybody else, to all the people still connected, I remind that as a Legume Society, we are marching toward our conference that will be in September in Granada. All the information are on our website, on Twitter. There is a dedicated website, ILSw-s1e07.com, but we'll keep spamming all the news, etc. I hope to see you all there. And with that, we are going to stop recording. Bye.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It was very nice. Thank you so much, and have a nice other webinar. I try to follow, not all the time. But hello,
sure.
Arco.